So tonight is our Diane DiPrima tribute. Briefly, I'm going to make this message now and again at the end. On Thursday, May 13th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Fred Gardafe and Anthony Mitzel, who are going to present What's So Funny About Italian Americans, Humor and Italian American Culture. So that's our webinar for May. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Adele Negro, the president of the West Coast Regional Chapter. She was someone who was spearheading this event tonight. And Courtney and I both want to thank her so much for putting together this panel this evening. Adele.
Thank you, Alan. The thanks go both ways. Good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Buonasera. Our thanks, of course, to YASA's Executive Committee and in particular to Courtney Ruffner for making this event possible, as well as to the designer of our poster, Diana Dorangritia, to YASA President, of course, Alan Gravano, for serving as co-moderator this evening, and especially to our four generous presenters, whom I will introduce shortly, and to all of you in attendance who make this the fitting end of a Poetry Month tribute that it deserves to be, to Diane DiPrima, who was called a singular force, a feminist in a poetry culture that was overwhelmingly male. As the San Francisco Chronicle stated in its lovely October 29th obituary, 4 days after Diane's death on October 25th of last year. Her partner of 42 years, Shepard Powell, later wrote that, quote, her death was easy and graceful, and yet I, Adele, have a feeling that she may have departed this world with the spirit of the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, imbuing his eternal words, do not go gentle into that good night, with the raging force of her irrepressible, indomitable, unparalleled vitality, courage, creativity, and resistance that fueled her life as a revolutionary writer, and so much more. As we used to say, and we may still say, they don't make them like that anymore. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Michael McClure, both so recently gone too, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Frank O'Hara, Philip Lamantia, the surrealist poet who inspired many of them, Audre Lorde of DiPrima's Hunter College high school days, and Diane DiPrima herself, La Loba, the she-wolf, the fierce mother, writer, activist, all that is tough, smart, and untamed in a woman. Mm-hmm. In fact, when our panelist, Lawrence DiStasi, longtime YASA member and several times WRC president, invited Diane to write at the then, to read at the then AIHA conference in San Francisco in 1989, she replied, what, am I the token woman? I don't think she had realized she would be in the company of another token woman and another luminary, Sandra Gilbert, one of our four presenters this evening and part of that early Hunter College High School poetry circle. Although I hardly know Diane DiPrima's extensive body of work as well as our panelists do, nevertheless, she and I are marked by three very similar beginnings. Both of us are Brooklyn-born girls, she of the Italian-American neighborhood of Carroll Gardens, although named for an Irishman, in the northeast and northwest part of the borough, my sisters and I, the diverse neighborhood of Flatbush on the southeast edge of the magical Prospect Park. Both our grandfathers were deep admirers of the poet Dante Alighieri, hers, Domenico Mallozzi, reading Dante's poetry to her when she was barely 4 years old. Mine, Secondo Negro, naming his son, my father, Dante, who would then go on to become a Dante scholar and professor of literature and language at Brooklyn College. And thirdly, both our grandfathers, hers a tailor, mine a carpenter, were inspired by the anarchists and knew that literature and philosophy well. My father's middle name, in fact, was Antonio. Could Gramsci, who drew much from the anarchists, have been the inspiration? In a 2014 interview, DiPrima was asked if she considered herself a beat, to which she answered, yes, if you define beat as a state of mind, not bound by any particular time or by a single generation. beat belongs to the great American counterculture. And Michael McClure said a year or two before he died, Diane was an important member of the new consciousness on the West Coast, even if she was born on the East. And so to more deeply explore that consciousness, that state of mind, it's now my distinct pleasure to introduce our four speakers in the order in which they will speak. Maria Mazziotti Gillan, Rachel Guido DeVries, Sandra Gilbert, and Lawrence DiStasi. I give the floor now to Maria Mazziotti Gillan, who was the winner of a 2014 George Garrett Award for Outstanding Community Service in Literature from the Association of Writers Programs, and the 2008 American Book Award for her book, All That Lies Between Us. She is the founder, executive director of the Poetry Center at Passaic County Community College, editor of the Patterson Literary Review, and director of the Creative Writing Program and professor of English at Binghamton University, SUNY. She has published 23 books, including Patterson Light and Shadow and What Blooms in Winter. Maria will read April Fool birthday poem for Grandpa from DiPrima's Revolutionary Letters and talk about Diane as a revolutionary role model. Andiamo, Maria, brava.
You, Adele. April Fool birthday poem for Grandpa. Today is your birthday, and I've tried writing these things before, but now in the gathering madness, I want to thank you for telling me what to expect, for pulling no punches back there in that scrubbed Bronx parlor. Thank you for honestly weeping in time to innumerable heartbreaking Italian operas, for pulling my hair when I pull the leaves off the trees so I know how it feels. We are involved in it now, revolution up to our knees, and the tide is rising. I embrace strangers on the street, filled with their love and mine. Love you told us how to come or we die. Told them all in that Bronx park, me listening in spring bronze dusk, breathing stars, so glorious to me, your white hair, your height, your fierce blue eyes, rare among Italians. I stood away off, looking up at you, my grandpa, people listen to. I stand away off listening as I pour out soup, young men with light in their faces at my table, talking love, talking revolution, which is love spelled backwards. How you would love us all with thunder, your anarchist wisdom at us, with thunder, Diane, Dante, and Giordano Bruno, orderly men, bent to your ends. Well, I want you to know we did it for you and your ilk, for Carlo Tresca, for Sacco and Vanzetti, without knowing it or thinking about it. So we do it for Aunt Aubrey Beardsley and Oscar Wilde, for tall streetlights shall be purple. Do it for Trotsky and Shelley and Big Dumb Kropotkin, Eisenstein's strike people, Jean Cocteau's and Nui. We do it for the stars over the Bronx, that they may look on earth and not be ashamed. I love that poem, and so much Diane, it seems to me, because she had a fire in her and was a revolutionary herself. And I really think that that connection to her grandfather was, although the family took her away from him when she was quite young, it still made a tremendous impression on her. And he was the person in her family that she most connected with. And I think that influenced the way she tried to live her life. She didn't just live her life for herself. She always was in the middle of giving out food with the diggers or having all these, of course, I think they took advantage of her, but that's my thought. All these young beat writers around her. She was always feeding them all. And I think that she found in that group of young revolutionaries people to echo her own feelings about what you had to do if you're going to live your life, live a good life, live a life that was meaningful. And she was always concerned about it, right to the end of her life. I think she wanted to live a life that had meaning, and she certainly did. She had a very strong influence on a lot of people. she helped me enormously, I have to say. She wrote the afterword to my collected poems, Where We Come From. She volunteered, because here's this famous poet saying she wants to do something for me. I don't want to ask for. And my daughter said, "You're a dummy. Go back there and tell her I wanted to do whatever she wants to do." So I slid back there and I said, she could do something for me if she wanted to. And she said, "I'll write the afterword for your book," which was extremely generous of her. And that's the way she treated me for the rest of the time that I knew her. I felt that although her life was very different from mine, that we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways, that there was a kind of desire to escape a normal everyday life that was in both of us, that there was a need to create and produce and help other people and influence other people. And I think we both had that. She has a million students who are grateful to her for what she did for them and for opening so many doors for all these people. For me, I will say that once we went down to, she used to let me share the stage with her. Now, look, when I read with Diane DiPrima, there would be 500 people in the audience, and they weren't there for me. I knew they were there for her, but always felt good to read with her. And I sold a lot of books, so that was very nice too. But one time we were on the way to go to Santa Cruz, to read in Santa Cruz, and she said, "We're going to stop and buy paints." I thought she meant for herself. I hadn't painted since I was about 27 or 28. And she said, "Oh, no, not for me. You're going to buy paints." I thought I was going to faint. I thought, I'm going to buy paints and make a fool of myself in front of Diane DiPrima. I couldn't bear it. So anyway, we buy the paint. She tells me what to buy. I buy them. We get to the hotel. She says, "You go in your room and paint, and I'll go in my room and paint." And are you not going to do what Diane tells you to do? Of course I did it. I went in the room. I'm ripping out pages because I kept trying to draw the roses that were blooming in front of the window, and I couldn't do it. I really can't draw at all. I couldn't do it. And suddenly I thought, stop it. What you have to do is draw your own rose. It's got to be Maria's rose. It's got to be Maria's flowers. And then something loosened up in me. And I don't know, I've just been painting like crazy ever since. I'm having a wonderful time with it. And I really thank Diane for that. I also have a message, the last message Diane left for me on my phone. And I play it often so I can hear her voice, because I did love her tremendously. And she was a very important part of my life for many, many years, really. And I think she was a very generous, giving spirit. And she was on fire. She showed me some pictures of herself when she was young. But even when she was old, even when she was starting to get very sick, there was something about her, Diane, that glowed and sparkled. And it was so wonderful and something to emulate. So I bow down to Diane's spirit. I hope she can hear us. I hope. Oh, once she sent me a postcard of two old ladies sitting on a bench. And she said, this is us. And we're sitting on a bench in a park talking to one another. And I think, Diane, wait for me. I'm coming. Not too soon, I hope. And I want to sit on a bench with you, Diane, and keep our conversation going. Anyway, God bless Diane DiPrima.
Grazie. Thank you, Maria. Mary Jo Bona also says that Diane was one of the most generous people that she knew.
Yes.
Especially when she was a young professor, when Mary Jo was a young professor and was encouraged. So you're touching on something extraordinarily central to who she was for so many hundreds of people. Our next speaker, who also was deeply touched by Diane, is Rachel Guido DeVries, who is a poet and fiction writer. Her most recent publication is a collection of poems, A Woman Unknown in Her Bones. An early collection, How to Sing to a Dago, was dedicated to DiPrima. Of Diane DiPrima, Rachel says, "Diane was and is one of the most important people in my life." Rachel lives in Cazenovia, New York, which I'll have you all know was designated by Budget Traveler as one of America's coolest small towns. A keep that a secret. She will talk about how their friendship began and developed, and will discuss Diane's use of language, as well as a favorite book of Diane's, The Calculus of Variation. Rachel will end with a reading of a poem from DiPrima's collection, Loba.
Thank you. Losing my voice. I want to just say hi to everybody and how glad I am to be here. And special thanks to Adele and Courtney for making this happen. And thanks too to Giovanna Capone, who let me know that this was happening. And you know, she was a student of mine at the Women's Writers Center many, many years ago. Diane and I were friends since 1986, I think, and her love and her support and her laughter and her wisdom profoundly enriched me. And I will miss her physical presence for the rest of my life. I keep that picture on my desk. I particularly love this picture with the smile. It's just so accepting and loving. And I keep it on my desk all the time to remember that love. I first met her in 1986. I'd invited her to read in a series I was coordinating for the Community Writers Project in Syracuse. And I was going to pick her up at the airport in Syracuse. I was nervous and excited. I can still see her walking towards me. She was small and round. I always say Italians are round people. We're not a straight up and down people. And there came Diane, small and round and wore a sort of half smile. Our first meeting was a little rough. We put her up at an old-fashioned motel in Casanova where I live. The motel room had no telephone. It seems to me there were no cell phones yet, or if there were, there certainly was no service. Diane made it clear she didn't like the motel, and to be fair, I don't blame her. But she wanted to stay there rather than stay at my house because she wanted the privacy, and so she settled in. I left her a basket of drinks and fruit and cheese and a copy of my novel, Tender Warriors, which had just come out. I said goodnight and went home a little worried and hopeful all would be fine in the morning. As a young woman, I wrote poems only furtively and with a sense of humility before language I felt lived somewhere not quite accessible within me. Then I found DiPrima's Dinners and Nightmares in a used bookstore and discovered at last the language I recognized. That book and The Calculus of Variation, which is sort of like a whole stream of consciousness book, and then Loba transported me to a place of translation so that my pen would rush along the pages of my journal and turn into poems of my own. When I awoke the next morning, it was inside a poem. I dream a dish of seashell, in which Diane gave me a dish made out of seashell with her name, and this is part of the poem, with her name on a dish like an ancient rune I could spend all my lifetimes deciphering. I included this poem in How to Sing to a Dago, a book of poems I dedicated to Diane. When I arrived at the motel to pick her up, she was sitting in the coffee shop, deeply immersed in my novel. She looked up and smiled, and thus began a friendship that lasted throughout our lives. I feel as though I've spent much of my life with Diane's poems and with her deep love and respect for friendship. The last couple of years were rough. I sort of lost her for a while, and when I called her on her birthday in 2019, we had a hard time hearing each other between my hearing aids and her Sjogren's syndrome made it very hard. So it was very frustrating. But early in 2020, I called her and her first question was to ask me, how are your knees? Because she remembered I had troubles with ACL tears. Diane, always aware and always loving. Even when she was a little prickly, which she could be, there was always a sense of love and even playfulness. I can still hear her laughter and the simple fun we had one day at an ice cream shop in Casanova, both of us recalling black and white ice cream sodas from her New York and my New Jersey lives. Diane, when she was at Swarthmore, she writes in Recollections of My Life as a Woman that in her dorm room, she had a small window and low eaves from which hung a waxy globe of provolone tied with a string with a knife stuck in it and a dried Italian salami. No one else, she writes in Recollections, at Swarthmore had a room like hers. Another memory around food is sharing a meal with Diane and Maria at the Ristorante Fior d'Italia in North Beach. And I remember that so well, Maria, you were speaking Italian to the waiter. And
Right.
we had just a great dinner and a really good time. We all shared a love of good Italian food. I love to make biscotti and frequently sent them to Diane and Shep and to Maria too.
Wonderful.
Diane sent me an apron from Fior d'Italia. I treasure the apron and the memory of that day. Diane will always be a force in poetry and for those who know, who knew, and who still know her. Her language celebrates an awareness of life and all it is a part of. The words and the cadences of her words make a kind of alchemy her wisdom effects. Through the placement of word and sound and shape, an evocation of the spirit evolves. It's a language so transformative, it demands a different way of reading, sensing, seeing past the literal, and even past the poetic to a place of non-rational knowing, moving much the way song does, illuminating and altering. And I'd like to close with Diane's poem Persephone reprised at the end of Lobo, part 16. One life is not more real than the other. Not in deflowering do we come into bloom. We have always been there. At the fluid boundary of Hades, we spring continuously into life and death. This is the province of the co-emergent mother, fruit within fruit, a sweetness known only at the source, where the fountain divides, becomes itself, where fruit and seed and flower dance equally, exchanging shapes, exchanging essences. There is no knife can sever me from her, where I go down to bleed, to birth, to die. Thank you.
Rachel, how can you expect me to say anything after that? I'm on the verge of tears. And yet, what a life-giving poem, and what a source of what a fertile mind that arose from. Thank you for reading that and for your wonderful reminiscences. Our next reminiscent poet is Sandra Gilbert. She has published 10 collections of poetry. In fact, I have to say that the very first poem I read of yours, Sandra, was The Summer Kitchen, which I occasionally read time and time again when I find myself doing my nonna's recipes.
Oh, thank you.
And it's more than just that. Sandra has most recently published Judgment Day from 2019, and among her prose books, Wrongful Death, Death's Door, Rereading Women, and The Culinary Imagination from Myth to Modernity. With Susan Gubar, she is co-author of The Mad Woman in the Attic and co-editor, if I'm not mistaken, of Still Mad, American Women Writers and the Feminist Imagination.
Co-author.
Co-author.
Co-author, right.
Not co-editor, co-author. Okay, great.
Co-author, yes.
Which is forthcoming in August of this year, right? Which also includes a section on Diane DiPrima. Sandra is a professor emerita at the University of California, Davis, and lives and works in the heart of the left coast, Berkeley. She will talk about Diane's early life in New York, where she attended Hunter High School with Diane and Audre Lorde. She will read DiPrima's poem for Baby O and talk about the revolutionary way in which DiPrima decided to become a single mom.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I have to say, I went to high school with Diane and Audre to Hunter High, which was a very peculiar institution, a school for, quote, gifted girls, where everybody was kind of unruly, and where Diane and Audre were both members of a group that they called the Branded. And at that time, she was a couple of years ahead of me, so I really looked up to her, and she acknowledged my existence, but just barely, because the older girls kind of looked down on the younger girls. And I have to tell you honestly that I really rarely saw her after high school, except one time we were reading poetry together and she remembered me and said hi, and I said hi to her. But I followed her career, of course, with great interest. And I want to say a few words about that. She and Audre were incredible role models for me and my classmates. And as you know, like so many of us at Hunter, Diane was part of an immigrant family, as I was too. She was encouraged to go on to an elite college, Swarthmore, but she hated Swarthmore. I'll just quote from her memoir of her life as a woman: the pretentious, awkward, intellectual life, clipped speech, stiff bodies, unimaginative clothes, poor food, frequent alcohol, and deathly mores by which I found myself surrounded. Nor did she find solace in most other options available to her. She said 9 to 5 was a prison, family was prison, cold intellect of campus, another prison. Seeking, like her early idol, John Keats, the life of art and the quote, holiness of the heart's affections, she later wrote that she chose the life of the renunciant, outside the confines and laws of that particular and peculiar culture of the 50s. Dropping out of college, she left home and settled into an impoverished but free-thinking bohemian life. It was incredible what she did, actually. I mean, for those of us who lived through the 50s, it was amazing that she just simply stepped out of the world of the 50s into the new world that was coming up. It was the world that was going to be the world of the 60s. DiPrima had no feminist vocabulary at that point, but she knew perfectly well that the poetry scene she had entered was male-defined, sometimes, quote, pompous, self-righteous, but she claimed that we walked together on the roads of art, and seeing it thus made it possible for me to walk among these men, because it was mostly men, mostly unhit on, generally unscathed. While so many beautiful 50s girls were seeking boyfriends, lovers, or potential husbands, DiPrima defined the men around her as friends and companions of the holy art. According to Recollections of My Life as a Woman, her realistic 2001 memoir of New York in the 50s, she had many lovers. The first person with whom she fell in love was a woman named Bonnie, and the second was the African-American poet Leroy Jones. We see her with Jones in a picture on the screen here. Even before these passionate affairs, though, and this is what I just want to focus on as amazing, she had decided at the age of 22 to have a baby. I do remember, she wrote, the words in my mind that if I didn't have a baby, I was going to get sick. Though she added strikingly, not that I for 1 minute thought of including a man in my life, in my home. That was out of the question. As far as I could see, all they were was trouble. She wrote about that early rebellious pregnancy with the same insouciance she brought to her frequent poetry readings. Here's her charming song for Baby-O, Unborn. Sweetheart, when you break through, you'll find a poet here. Not quite what one would choose. I won't promise you'll never get hungry or that you won't be sad on this gutted, breaking globe. But I can show you, baby, enough to love to break your heart forever. After giving birth to her first daughter, Jeannie, DiPrima raised her while co-editing a literary magazine, The Floating Bear, with Leroy Jones, working in a village bookstore, founding the Poets Theater with a group of friends, entering into what she called a marriage of convenience with Alan Marlowe. She published her own poetry and eventually mothered 4 more children. Her deeply erotic relationship with Leroy Jones was intense and vexed. When it began, she wrote, she defined herself as a duo, herself and the child. She defined herself as her work, stepped into the love affair, not knowing where it would lead. Where it led might, from some perspectives, seem disastrous, but from DiPrima's point of view, it was essential to remain self-defined in the midst of it all, even infidelity. She wrote, Roy slept around, he lied, he didn't show up when he was going to, showed up unexpectedly, treated me like a peer, a queen, a servant. All that went with saying I took it as it came. And then, despite his protests, for he was already married with 2 children, she bore his child, her second daughter, Dominique, on her own. And as her children grew, she kept on writing poems to them. I want to read a poem that she wrote for the daughter who was originally Baby-O. Letter to Jeannie at Tasahara. Dry heat of the Tasahara Canyon, moist warmth of San Francisco summer, bright fog reflecting sunrise as you step out of September's Zendo, heart of your warmth, my girl, as you step out into your Vajra pathway, glinting like your eyes turn sideways at us, your high, knowing 13-year-old wench smile, flicking your thin ankles, you trot toward adventure, all sizes and shapes. Oh, may it be various for you as for me it was. Sparkle like dust motes at dawn in the back of gray stores, like the shooting stars over the Hudson, wind in the Berkshire pines. Oh, you have landscapes dramatic like mine never was. Uncounted caves to mate in, my Scorpio, bright love like fire, light up your beauty years on these new jagged hills. I find her poems to her children amazing, groundbreaking, innovative. I think that in the 21st century, the choice of single motherhood isn't so unusual. But in the era that Robert Lowell called the tranquilized 50s, DiPrima was a kind of prophetess of matriarchy. It was extraordinary. I want to toast her courage and to congratulate all her babyos on their extraordinary good fortune in being born to a splendid poet and a powerful parent.
Wonderful, wonderful,
Wonderful.
Sandra. In fact, we were hoping to have two of her babyos here today, Dominique and Rudy, but for a number of reasons, they weren't able to join us, so that I hope we can share this recording with them. And I know that Maria Proti has put on the chat the petition that is asking for everyone to sign in order to make a park in San Francisco named for Diane DiPrima. So take a look at the chat when you have a chance. Yeah, that was, I mean, these are, I knew it would be moving, but this is more moving than almost I can handle as a co-moderator. An extraordinary, extraordinary person. The last person on our panel today who will be discussing her is Lawrence DiStasi, not a stranger to any of you, who has been the project director of the traveling exhibit Una Storia Segreta, When Italian Americans Were Enemy Aliens, since its very inception in 1994. What an odyssey that was. Inspiring a national movement which resulted in Public Law number 106/451, the Wartime Violation of Italian American Civil Liberties Act, which was signed by President Bill Clinton. The curator, currently a newsletter editor of the Italian American Studies Association Western Regional Chapter, our chapter, Larry works as a writer and publisher of Saniti Publications. He is the author of 8 books, among which are Malocchio, The Underside of Vision, Dream Streets, The Big Book of Italian American Culture, Una Storia Segreta, The Secret History of Italian American Evacuation and Internment During World War II, and Branded, How Italian Americans Became Enemies During World War II. He lives in the unfindable Bolinas, California. Larry will read and comment on DiPrima's poem, Minnesota Morning Ode, which also appears in his big book of Italian American culture. And he will also reflect on DiPrima's fractious relationship with her Italian American parents. Take it away, Larry. You may need to unmute yourself, Larry.
Sorry. I'm not sure I can live up to what's already been said, but I'm delighted to be here with all of my friends. I was never really a friends with Diane DiPrima, but I had a couple of encounters with her. Adele has already talked about one. When she said, "What, I'm to be the token woman?" Just immediately when I asked her to read with us. And then sometime before that, I I got her agreement to have this poem, Minnesota Morning Ode, in my big book of Italian American culture. And it's in a section called Cities on the Hill. And it's a section of visionaries, and she was certainly one. And that's why this poem was chosen. And it's dedicated, it's called Minnesota Morning Ode for Giordano Bruno. The city of the sun is coming. I hear it, I smell it. Here where they have made even the earth a jailer, where not even the shadows of animals sneak over the land, where children are injured and taught to apologize for their scars. The city of the sun cannot be far now. That's what you said then, brother, waiting in prison 8 years to be burned, to find the sun at last on the Campo dei Fiori, field of flowers, yes. How could it be far? Isn't evil at its peak, you asked 300 years ago? Has not the descent into matter reached a nadir? And here, 5,000 miles later, northern Minnesota, a forest once, now a wasteland, where they mow grass, rake leaves, I vomit lies like the rest, not knowing whom to trust. Here, where betrayal is taught as virtue, I weep alone for the words I would like to say, and silently put the faces of the old gods into the hands of the children. Hope they recognize them here in this Christian place where Christ the Magus and Christ the Healer are both forgotten, where the veil of the temple is rent, but no resurrection follows. The city of the sun comes soon, cannot be far. Yes, you are right. What's a millennium or two to us, brother? The gods can wait. They are strong. They rise. The golden tower flashing the light of planets, the speaking statues that guard its four gates, the holy wind that carries the spirit of heaven down through the stars. It is here. It is here. I will build it on this spot. I will build it at Attica and Wounded Knee on the Campo dei Fiori. At the Vatican, the strong, bright light of flesh, which is the link, the laughter, which transmutes. Okay, that's, you can take that down now. So this poem obviously has jail in its very second line, the earth a jailer. And of course, the city of the sun was a sort of utopia written by Tommaso Campanella while he was in prison in 1602. He very narrowly escaped burning, as Bruno was, but he was tortured and he was in prison for something like 27 years, I think. And of course, she addresses Giordano Bruno, waiting in prison 8 years to be burned. And then she raises in the, the third stanza, here in this Christian place where Christ the Magus and Christ the Healer. And this reference to the Christ the Magus brings up DiPrima's penchant for using the word magic. And she spelled it M-A-G-I-C-K to distinguish it from, magic tricks. And it was one of her preoccupations, magic. She actually started a school of magic in San Francisco, I believe. But it brings up the Golden Bough, that volume by Sir James Fraser that everyone read, all the literary people at any rate read. And the theory that he enunciated there was that magic is the forerunner of myth, which then evolves to religion. So magic was the original source. And then in that last stanza, she writes, "The strong, bright light of flesh, which is the link." That phrase, "the bright light of flesh," brings up a real preoccupation of hers in her poetry. She wrote in an essay in 1975 called "Light and Keats," the most high aim of poetry is to create that sense of light. And finally, that last word in the poem, transmutes. And that brings us to another of her preoccupations, which was alchemy. Transmuting base metal to gold, but there was more than that. It was a symbol for the redemption of the world. And this really is the ultimate transformation that DiPrima is always attempting through her poetry, the transformation in America. And she was hoping it would be by the activism of the youth who were coming up. So now what's interesting also, and it's just been brought up by Maria, I know, is her relationship with Domenico Malozzi, who was her favorite grandfather and inspiration. And there are all kinds of Dominicans in this poem too. Bruno was a Dominican monk, and Campanella too was a Dominican. And of course, Diane's second child was named Dominique because she was expecting to have a boy, so she was going to name him Dominic, but when it was a girl, she named her Dominique. Now, I think in the poem that Maria read, she was alluding to, it alludes to the time that her grandfather was speaking in Bronx River Park. And at the end, she says, he is talking about love. He talks for a long time about love. He is saying that we must love each other or die. I understand this part. I seem to know it in my bones. It seems it is more than we must love one another. There is a love to learn that is generic, that is just love, and it doesn't need an object. It is as if he is saying, we must learn how to love. Now, the contrast between this grandfather, who was teaching how to love, and her parents is really stark and striking. She calls them bowed, intimidated people. She says, assault was the model of their world, the world as my parents understood it, a kind of immigrant fear I carry to this day. What she's alluding to is that her father apparently regularly beat her with his belt, with his fists. And somebody mentioned when she quit Swarthmore, and she writes about that in Recollections. And she says, when she tells her parents at the age of 18 that she is quitting Swarthmore to go live in the village with several of her friends, she says, I am not sure how many sentences I get out before I am on the floor. Mother has a nervous fit. But she's not deterred by that. She goes ahead anyway, and she lives with her two friends in the village. Then again, when she becomes pregnant with her first child, And she says, no, there's no father here. There's no father to marry. And she brings her doctor, her family doctor with her because she knew that she was going to have some trouble with breaking this to her parents. And so she says that the doctor's presence, who was actually arguing that an abortion at 4 months would be dangerous, is the one thing that prevents violence. But her father insists that she have an abortion anyway. And she comments thus, "There is still that between us, that he would rather have had me dead than himself dishonored. Better to have me dead than myself and my child thriving outside his code of ethics." So, and then she comments about her family's disappointment in her. They thought she could be a doctor or a lawyer like her father. And she says this, "For them, the struggle for advancement had been so severe, they had felt their low status so keenly that everything was measured solely in terms of advancement. A special kind of immigrant dysfunction. It marked us all." And she felt that strongly. And so I would argue that all of this, the immigrant dysfunction, the violence of her father, is really one of the sources for DiPrima's penchant for what she calls magic. And I'll give you an example from recollections of what she meant by magic. She called it swinging. And they used to go out when they were living in Hell's Kitchen. And swinging was setting out with a dime and running into the person you loaned $5 to last year. With no idea where you were going. They could go anywhere and meet anybody. So it was trusting in meeting somebody. And so all of this leads ultimately to what I would call her drive to find a higher reality. And that was at least in part due to that terrible relationship with her parents. And just as another confirmation of this, at the very end of her book, of her memoir, when her best friend, Freddie Herco, commits suicide, she says, "That was the feeling we all had for weeks, I think, but being for the most part only fragments of our battered children's selves, that feeling just paralyzed us as it had always done when we were little." So what she is saying is that they were all, in a way, battered children, and she wanted to find another kind of reality, and she did. In poetry, in the imagination, and she cites Keats numerous times in this regard. Keats saying, "I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of the imagination." And so she found it in poetry, in magic, in esoteric practices like alchemy, mythology, and Zen and Tibetan Buddhism. And it's also thus that she is first drawn to the West in San Francisco, which I'm interested in. She had been there for a week or so in the early 1960s. And in 1994, she writes this: "Anything seemed possible in San Francisco then, still does sometimes for a moment now, but that is rare. Any place where anything seems possible is bound to go, crushed by the border guards of the permissible. But it gleamed, by God. The roofs and towers, the painted stoops and hilltop parks, while ancient women and barefoot teenage boys chatted together on the never crowded buses, and we scoured the grass for evidence of other worlds, and a parallel universe rode in every night on the fog." That almost seems like the city of the sun that she's talking about. And this is San Francisco. And I'd also like to mention her relationship with Suzuki Roshi, who is the founder of the Zen Center in San Francisco. She had actually met him in 1962, and he married her to Alan Marlowe. And she describes the first interview she had with him. Then I looked into his eyes and was stopped in my tracks. Shunryu Suzuki Roshi was the first person I ever met for whom I felt immediate and total trust. I knew then and there that whatever it was he did, I wanted to do it so that I could begin to see what he saw and think like him. Of course, there's a lot more to say about DiPrima and her poetry, but that would require a whole book.
Mhm.
Let us just say that she was remarkable in her determination to be a poet. I think when she was 14 years old, she wrote Nulla dies sine linea, Latin. No day without a line, a new commitment, a new purpose. And she did that throughout her life. And finally, her ambition was huge. She wasn't just talking about a political revolution. She wanted an entire overturning of civilization. Listen to this poem from Revolutionary Letter number 12. The vortex of creation is the vortex of destruction. The vortex of artistic creation is the vortex of self-destruction. The vortex of political creation is the vortex of flesh destruction. Flesh is in the fire. It curls and terribly warps. Fat is in the fire. It drips and sizzling sings. Bones are in the fire. They crack tellingly in subtle hieroglyphs of oracle, charcoal singed, the smell of your burning hair. For every revolutionary must at last will his own destruction, rooted as he is in the past he sets out to destroy. And I'll read one final poem if you'll bear with me. This is from May 1st, 2011. It's called May Dance. May the standing stones once more guard the edge of the space-time continuum. May the maypole dance, the dance of life, continue. May we begin the healing of the earth. May brightness cease to fall from the air. May we remember who we are, who we have always been, before race, before class, before gender, before the last 10,000 years, 20,000 years stupidity, and she has in parentheses, means being in a stupor. May our only struggle once again be the ultimate struggle within our own minds, hearts, the struggle to open further, open to all humans, to all beings, to all that is, all that can be. May it be peaceful, may it be joyous, all power to the imagination.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Before we open it up to any comments and questions, I would like to say that I want to mention, in case, and I think most of you would know, that she was San Francisco Poet Laureate in 2009 until 2011. And she was the subject of a documentary film titled The Poetry Deal, which also captures the title of her last full-length book of poetry. I think it was her last, called The Poetry Deal. And when City Lights published it and it was being considered her legacy, she said, I don't think about it as a legacy. I'm more concerned with the fact that I have 50 more books that I have to get out.
That's great.
And a very poignant and beautiful last line I want to mention is the haiku that she left as a voice on her answering machine. And she was really sick. She never made it home again after she was moved to a care center. And she said, let the hand shake. The line is a living thing.
Mm.
Fabulous.
Yes. the line is a living thing and she lives on. And that is the great beauty of art, poetry, and revolution, that it inspires the mind well beyond the flesh. Shall we, Alan, do you want to field any questions or comments? We don't have to have questions, but anybody who wants to add to what these wonderful presenters have shared with us.
I've been monitoring the chat for all of you, and everyone has been saying kind words. So no one's asked any questions. I've repeated it twice. Just, I know with the tribute, sometimes people don't feel comfortable asking questions, but there's lots of accolades in the chat. I put lots of links. I put the link twice to the petition, so that's there as well. We had several people who signed the petition during the webinar. So, but one more opportunity if there's any of our attendees. We had 49 people in attendance today, which is fabulous. If anyone has any questions, you can either type it into the Q&A or into the chat. We do have a question. Gail Retano asked, could Larry Lawrence expand on what he said about the connection between magic, myth, and religion?
Have 3 hours?
I'm not all that familiar with the Golden Bough, but I remember reading in Recollections, Diane said that she had all 15 volumes and she was going through them very carefully. So she knew that volume intimately. The connection that Fraser made, and which has not been verified by anthropologists, by the way, I'm sorry to say. He said that magic was the original, what would I call it? I'm not even sure what I would call it, but it was the original before mythology and before religion. In other words, priests descended from people who did magic, and religion descended from magical, a magical way of understanding reality. And then it came, then he said it evolved into myth. So we have all of the mythology. And then he said it evolved finally into religion. So religion was a descendant of magic and mythology. And that's what I believe he meant by that. And as I said, the most anthropologists do not subscribe to that theory anymore. But a great many writers and literary folks, artists, did subscribe to that theory, and Diane DiPrima certainly did, I think. Yeah.
Okay,
So that there was a question on the chat that I'd like to comment on.
Sure.
Could you repeat the question so that?
Yeah. We have two questions. I'll read them both for everyone on the panel, because I think this is for some of the others. When did Diane DiPrima discover her ethnicity intellectually? And then, can you tell us how Diane DiPrima influenced your sense of female poetics?
Well, that's the question that I just want to make one comment, because the two poems that I read that she wrote, the one to Baby O and the one to Baby O when she was 13, and many other poems that she wrote, poems to her children. It's a kind of new genre, and she was one of the first people to be working in this new genre. I mean, women traditionally did not write poems to their children. Male poets did write poems to their children, but they were very formal and ceremonial. But women didn't really write to their children, except unless the children were dead, then they would write these sentimental dead baby poems in the 19th century. But the kinds of poems that DiPrima wrote to her children are a very new mode. And it's a tremendous advance for women. Then you get people like Sylvia Plath writing to her children, and Adrienne Rich writing to her children. It's and people all writing to their children. But again, I just want to say, I want to reiterate how DiPrima was a prophetess of matriarchy. How she had the child by herself at the age of 22, when she had resisted all of the pressure from her immigrant parents that Larry was talking about, and just gone on to have the baby and be complete and withstand all that pressure, and then write poems about it. And then write poems, make it into her art. In other words, art and life were continuous for her, and they were continuously part of a kind of matriarchal web that in a certain sense we could trace back to Fraser in some ways too. So just wanted to say that.
I think too, it's wonderful that Diane was able to write those poems at a time when women poets were not really, if they wrote about children, they would be sort of shunted aside. So she was very brave in doing that. And she was surrounded, she told me once that she called him Roy. I told her that there was going to be a group of reading. They were going on the ferry and they were going to go read in Staten Island or something, and Alan was going and a whole bunch of the beats. And he said, we'll pick you up. And they left her. They didn't pick her up. And I think, and she was still a little hurt by that. It was like 50 years before. But I understand the hurt, because in essence, they were a male group and she was there, but she was not quite one of them, although they were happy to eat her food.
Right. Exactly.
I'd like to add something to that question, and that is that the life force that I sort of understand her dealing with all the time is, I have a series of poems called The Not Mother from Patterson. I am someone who never had children. Diane and I talked sometimes about what that meant, you know, to the body. And that's a question I asked myself. What did it mean? What did it mean to the body to not do something it was equipped to do? And I feel like in a certain way, Diane's life force was what I would think of as my understanding of female poetics.
Yeah, it was that quality of grabbing onto life, which is what she had.
Yeah.
And the fact that she mentored so many of us, that was part of her instinct to try to grow the love of poetry and art. And I can't tell you the number of museums I walked through with Diane, always having a wonderful time, I have to say. And the way that she enjoyed art, the way that she steeped herself in it, the way she steeped herself in poetry. And I saw the notebooks that she wrote in, and she would always draw in the notebooks as well. Her papers were at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And there were all these wonderful notebooks with beautiful drawings that she did. And writing, her handwriting, she must have gone to a Catholic school, because her handwriting was beautiful. And this flowing penmanship, and then these beautiful drawings. It was really amazing.
I know we're just going a little bit over. I'm going to, just two questions I want to try to ask both, and then that's all the time we have for tonight. Roseanne asked a question, which was, for any of the panelists who want to answer this, give us some sense of DiPrima's vision of a transformed civilization. And then Donna Drews has an easy one, maybe not so easy, but if any of you want to suggest what would be, if there was one book by DiPrima that you would recommend, which book would it be?
Mhm. Well, a transformed civilization would be would be one in which we learned how to love, for one thing, that her grandfather was talking about in that Bronx River Park, and also it seemed that she really felt that we could go back 20,000 years. Not that she says that in one of her poems that I didn't get to read. let's see, it was revolutionary poem. Yeah, revolutionary letter number 32. Not Western civilization, but civilization itself is the disease which is eating us. Not the last 5,000 years, but the last 20,000 are the cancer. Not modern cities, but the city. Not capitalism, but ism, art, religion. Once they are separate enough to be seen and named art, named religion. Once they are not simply the daily acts of life which bring rain, bring bread, heal, bring the herds close enough to hunt, birth the children. So in other words, she was looking to going very far back before civilization itself. And I don't know, it's hard to know whether someone really meant that literally or what, but I think she saw it coming. I think she saw that coming in the 60s, as far as I can tell.
To answer Donna's question, Larry, or any of you, I mean, it's hard to pick one book to,
It is hard.
There's her memoir, what is it, My Life as a Woman?
Recollections of my life as a woman, yeah.
As a woman, and well, revolutionary letters. I mean, where do we start? But Recollections of My Life as a Woman might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
There's also a wonderful article by Iris Cushing in Granta, which Larry had turned me on to. It's a beautiful, beautiful reflection on who Diane DiPrima was. It was written as an obituary a few days after, shortly after she died. So if you can look it up, the Granta article by Iris Cushing, C-U-S-H-I-N-G. I suppose I can put it in the chat, but I would recommend that and her memoir to start with.
The memoir is wonderful. It's a wonderful book.
Really, really, really is. Yeah, it's brilliant. Well,
unless there is, I think, Alan, you said we are past our prime. So if anybody has, Pasquale Verdicchio, how nice to see you. There's so many people I'm seeing on the chat that I would love to say hello to in more direct terms, but if anybody has more questions, comments, please send them to, are the panelists willing to be approached? If
Yes.
specific questions, can we give out your
Yes.
information? Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you to Courtney, who appeared on the screen late. Thank you so much, Courtney, for your help with this. If we drove you crazy, well, we shall overcome someday. And
Adele, was this recorded?
It is recorded. This was absolutely beautiful. Thank you all. I will have it uploaded and I'll send you a link.
Thank you. I can have it put on my blog, and not that I do it myself.
yeah, I don't think, Courtney, there's no restriction on sharing this with anybody.
No, it's on YouTube.
Yeah, wonderful.
It's on YouTube. Good. Thank you. Will you send me the link?
Yeah, all right. Thank you all. This was truly a wonderful, wonderful event. Diane DiPrima is stomping up there and smiling down, and hopefully creating yet one other of her 50 books to be published.
I bet there are a lot of handwritten poems around that Diane wrote and has never had published, I'm sure.
Wow, yeah, that would be some treasure to find.
Yeah,
Well,
a line a day.
What, Larry?
A line a day, not a day without a line. So she was writing all the time.
She meant it very seriously. She took it very seriously, I think.
Oh, well,
And she did that. And the last time I saw her was 3 years before she died, and she was still doing that and still doing those wonderful drawings in the book with the poems she was writing.
Yeah.
Well, Maria, you'll have to publish a book of your paintings.
I actually, somebody did publish a book of my paintings, but their earliest paintings And now I have so many more and my style has changed. So honest to God, you could be seeing unless I drop dead, which of course is always,
Maria.
You're in your.
it's
blue
always a
area.
possibility at my age. But I'm trying to keep going.
Hey, listen.
I want to thank Adele, Rachel, Maria, Larry, Sandra, and of course Courtney, who behind the works. I can't tell you how much Courtney does to get these webinars off the ground. Last comment for those who are still in attendance: we have our webinar next month with Fred Gardathay and Anthony Mitchell. Someone put in the chat, you know, we want to keep these going. We've been doing one a month, sometimes two a month for the last year since COVID happened. So we're continuing these throughout the rest of the year. So we have a lineup between now and the end of the year as well. So please stay tuned on the YASA website for more events. But I want to thank all of our presenters again today.
And thank you all for arranging this. It was wonderful to talk about Diane.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be
Right,
part
but-
of this.
It was wonderful to talk about her.